So good evening, everybody. Good evening here, all those of you online. Great to have you with us this evening. We are excited to be talking with you about using neurotechnology as a way to increase performance and longevity, and particularly geared toward executives, but not only for executives. My name is Fran Bieganek, co-founder of the clinic Odishaw, and I will be talking with you tonight about the brain spa and all of the fascinating neurotechnology you can use to really optimize your game. So as we get going, every time we do a presentation, we like to spend just a couple of minutes giving a little gratitude and thanks to the people who have mentored us and trained us along the way. They come from a variety of disciplines, and we really kind of have moved in the direction of using the information that we get from their research and the work that they've done in the field of neurotechnology to guide us in the offerings that we provide at the Brain Spa. So we always get this question, is there research for neurotherapy or on neurotherapy? And our standard answer is just simply, yes, there is. You could just go to Google Scholar, and a couple weeks ago I did that, and they told me that over 3,900,000 studies exist on electrical stimulation. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And so we definitely just want to encourage you to trust that there is research out there. This slide just gives you some information about some of the areas of research we're going to talk about. In particular, this evening, we're going to talk about neurostimulation. We're going to talk about audio-visual entrainment, and we're also going to talk about photobiomodulation as well. So we're going to get into the meat of things here. As executives, kind of the real cornerstone to remaining a successful executive is the capacity to access resilience. And so what we know about executives is that they have a lot of performance blockers that they have to navigate each and every day, sometimes each and every hour of the day. So one of those areas is kind of in the realm of all of the data that comes at them, all of the stimulus. Oftentimes executives are working in fast-paced, almost like stimulus-saturated environments, and having that inundation on a regular basis, while it can be stimulating, it also can lead to decision fatigue, as well as kind of an experience of brain fog. And if you add to that the tiring of the brain and its ability to kind of be flexible, that can really impact creativity. And so that process of cognitive inflexibility that can happen can make it difficult to move into brainstorming sessions and be able to pivot quickly and to consider other ideas as they are being presented. Another kind of performance blocker that executives often face is the idea of the emotional stress bleed. So there is a ton of emotional stress that comes along with being in an executive position, whether that's you running a company, owning a company, C-suite executives who are in leadership roles. There's oftentimes the stress of deadlines, stress of worker communication challenges, the stress of financial decisions, all of those things that can really kind of up the level of emotional dysregulation one might experience. And then if you add into that the fact that that executive also has a personal life, and so they've got their own level of stressors, and even if the stressors are positive, like let's say maybe they have kids and the kids are in a lot of activities and those activities are fun and cool to be a part of, they also are time consuming, and that consumption can really increase levels of stress. And so oftentimes that emotional distress can kind of bleed into the work environment, and that can actually have an effect not only on the executive who's feeling that, but on the people that she or he is working with. And then lastly is the whole area of performance blocker that has to do with sleep and insomnia. So oftentimes executives find themselves in a position where they have a hard time turning off their mind. And so that impacts not only the quantity, but the quality of sleep that they have. And then oftentimes executives may be flying to different states, maybe internationally, and they're dealing with jet lag on top of that. And so These 4 areas can really lead to a significant level of what feels like fatigue and burnout for the executive. So what we want to talk with you about is how to use neurotechnology to really start to increase your output and increase your level of resilience. So in our brain spa, we really use neurotech to give executives that competitive edge, that ability to be able to provide some measurable advantage over competitors, to be able to tap into your resilience and to really kind of up your game when it comes to your performance. We like to talk about, in the brain spa, we offer kind of this quad tech fusion group of protocols. We're going to talk about transcranial alternating current stimulation. We're going to talk about transcranial photobiomodulations, that's light therapy. We're going to talk with you about pulsed electromagnetic frequency stimulation and also audio-visual entrainment. And we're really wanting to highlight to you the benefits of this, of coming in, of using a brain spa as a way to really just continue to kind of engage in self-care that optimizes your brain functioning. So the first protocol we're going to talk about is transcranial alternating current stimulus. And we're really going to look at this as a way to really kind of give energy to the brain and to bring a sense of calm to the brain as well. In an era of information overload, the executive who can focus longer, sleep better, and stay calmer wins. That's what our aim is in providing this protocol in the brain spa. So most executives are kind of day-to-day experiencing and interacting with life kind of from a reactive place because there is so much being thrown at you all of the time. The tendency is to just kind of react from that reactive place. And so oftentimes you're doing a good job of managing time, but you really are bleeding energy, and you can feel that physically, and that's also happening in your brain. And as that occurs, that can lead to that sense of brain fog, the difficulty making decisions, and kind of you having to rely on like chemicals like caffeine or other nootropics to kind of keep your energy level up. Transcranial alternating stimulation is a way of being able to do that without having to rely on those outside devices. And so if you get in the habit of like having a membership at the brain spa, you're able to on a regular basis come in and use this technology as a way to really kind of get your focus and clarity pumped up. TACS, basically what it's doing is it's entraining the brain through a process of transmitting a sine wave, an electrical sine wave to the brain in whatever area we have, depending on what you're looking to enhance. And what it's doing is really just kind of nudging the brain to kind of use its own natural rhythms. So we're not really looking at fixing the brain in any way. We're really just kind of working on with the timing of the information that the brain already has. And so what the mechanism of action here is this idea of an external electrical field that we have that starts to, as we do the TACS, starts to shift the resting membrane potential of the neuron. And as that happens with that sine wave, if we saw back here, the sine wave is kind of moving us. It moves up and down in a very repetitive fashion. Kind of think about how a metronome works, kind of going back and forth. The sine wave does that. It's just got the peaks and the valleys of the wave. And as it is kind of moving the brain, stimulating the brain with that sine wave, what starts to happen is clusters of neurons in the areas where the sensors for the TACS are located on the head. Those neurons start to kind of march in step, meaning kind of starting to produce together that same electrical wave that is being stimulated to the brain. And what it ends up doing is creating a much more coherent signal, and so that means the brain is able to communicate in a much more efficient method. When we look at the different types of stimulation we might do with TACS, we think about looking at the brainwave frequencies and which frequency we might want to use to optimize your brain in whatever direction you're wanting to go. So for example, we might use gamma wave stimulation. So that's somewhere between 30 and 80 hertz. That's where gamma waves land. We kind of like to think of gamma waves as like the glue for the brain. They really help to link the brain areas for cohesive thought, clarity of thought, focus, but also really solid, clear, coherent information processing. And so really working with a bunch of different parts of the brain and really enhancing the communication between all of those areas. Beta waves are more of kind of like status quo. So when beta waves are showing up, they're oftentimes helpful for analytical thinking, kind of a sense of alertness, and also play a role in some motor control kinds of processes. And then we have the gatekeepers, which is alpha wave. That's between 8 and 12 hertz. Alpha waves, when they are present, they kind of inhibit distracting information. So what that can do is allow you to kind of have this sense of calm focus, or what we might say as kind of enhancing a flow state. And so they can be really helpful in regards to just kind of keeping you focused on whatever it is that you need to be focused on in this moment. And then theta waves, which are a slower wave frequency, are, I always think of these as the aha wave. It's kind of, it's a slower frequency, and so your cognition is going offline just a little bit. And what theta wave can be really helpful for is, we see it oftentimes with creativity. It can be helpful in memory consolidation and kind of a sense of deep relaxation. And so when we do transcranial alternating current stimulation, we will typically choose a protocol from within one of these frequencies and utilize that based on what it is that you as an executive are coming in for on that particular day. We'll give you a few examples of some protocols. So the first one here would be for somebody who maybe is experiencing a lot of brain fog, having trouble with decision making, that sort of thing. Oftentimes, the best frequencies to use to target TACS on with this particular problem would be somewhere in the beta or gamma frequencies. The idea being that we're kind of stimulating the brain again to start creating those frequencies on its own, to not even create, but just to kind of increase the level of the amount of that frequency that's showing up in that area of the brain. When we do this, the outcome typically is that people have better improvement in working memory. Kind of the ability, working memory is the part of your memory that allows you to manipulate information. And so when that gets enhanced, it makes it much easier to hold a lot of different variables in your mind and your awareness as you're working on problem solving, making decisions, those sorts of things. And so the stimulation can kind of help your brain to get into that state where they're able to kind of do that function fairly successfully. It can also increase fluid intelligence, and so problem solving can go a lot quicker. Remember, I was talking about how information processing can be enhanced. That's very helpful when it comes to problem solving, being able to kind of move quickly through information and look at it in many different ways. And so a way you might do that with in the brain spa is you might come in and do a 20 to 40 minute session. Let's say you've got a big meeting that day, maybe a meeting with the board, maybe a big presentation. You've got a bunch of complex data you have to dig into and problem solve around. This is the kind of protocol that could kind of really give you that jolt that you need to kind of get your brain into that state that will allow you to be quite successful with those tasks. The second protocol is really more around emotion regulation. What this can really do is help to calm your system in general. Alpha, especially the higher frequency alpha is associated with relaxed alertness. So you're aware but relaxed. And when you move a brain into alpha state, it has a much better ability to just be calm, to tap into resilience, so quicker recovery from stressors, and that might be long-term stressors, but also kind of the more immediate stressors that might happen in a day. So you might, have had a really stressful morning and you're feeling overwhelmed by that. And alpha frequency, just hitting it with some transcranial alternating stimulation, could really help to bring that more of a sense of resiliency. It also can help with impulse control because it's kind of moving you out of that fight-flight response, the sympathetic response, and so can kind of help you to be more logical. And so if you find yourself in that place where you get really overwhelmed at work, you've got a lot coming at you, and you have a difficult time managing the stress that is coming as part of that, and you're really short with employees, people on your leadership team, maybe even some anger outbursts happening. This is the kind of protocol that can help to kind of calm that system down. And so it can allow you to be much more composed as you are in your work environment. This last protocol has to do with the sleep challenges that come for so many executives. And so it's really about optimizing sleep and optimizing the recovery of your whole system, which then contributes significantly to resilience. For a lot of executives, we refer to it as executive insomnia, and what it actually is meaning is that you have a difficult time shutting your brain off, right? And so it's getting stuck like in beta wave area and maybe high beta wave, and you just can't stop thinking, right, about the next thing that has to be solved, about the thing you forgot to do, all of that kind of thing. So moving your brain into more of a slow wave, so a theta wave, it can be a really helpful way to start quieting it down. And what that can do for you kind of in the short term. So let's say you know that you're going to have a super, super, super busy day. It's going to have you really wired, and you know yourself well enough to know that you're probably not going to be able to quiet down very easily that night. That would be a good time at the end of your day to come in, do an alpha protocol or a theta protocol to just start calming your system down and quieting your brain down so that it can prepare to head into sleep. This is crucial in terms of cognitive restoration in order to have good memory reconsolidation, good restoration, both cognitively and physically. We need to have healthy sleep, and this kind of a protocol can be helpful for that. This is just kind of talking a lot about what I just said, but giving you some idea of the frequencies that we might use in the brain spa. So if you came in and said, I really need some help, I'm really struggling with being able to, I've got a bunch of reports to go over and I'm struggling with being able to kind of process that data. I keep just kind of feeling overwhelmed and fatigued when I try to do that. We might decide, let's give you a gamma protocol of TACS as a way of enhancing your gamma waves so that you can be more successful in that task. And then the other piece of this, so we're talking about the stimulation, the transcranial stimulation, and what that can do kind of in the moment, right? So you come into the brain spa, we give you some gamma waves, you go away and you do a great job in your presentation, something like that, right? But if you do that on a regular basis, which is why it's always good to kind of have this as part of your kind of routine self-care. And so we talk in the brain spa a lot about getting a membership so that you can access this on a regular basis, because what the research shows is that repeated sessions have a tendency to start rewiring the brain so that it can start to access those states on a more regular basis without the need of a device like some of our neurostimulation devices to make that happen. So it can, if you're doing it regularly, have some of that long-term effect which ultimately can enhance performance on a regular basis then. So we would recommend somewhere between maybe 2 to 3 to 4 or 5, if you want to do that, times a week where you're coming in to the brain spa to give yourself that neurotech advantage as a way of kind of keeping you moving forward and being successful. So just a reminder, so when we're doing transcranial alternating stimulation, we're not fixing a problem, it's just optimizing an asset that you already have. So optimizing your brain functioning and tapping into whatever frequency might be best for what you're needing to do most in your work. So we've done transcranial alternating current stimulation. Now we're going to talk about audio-visual entrainment. And so this is a neuromodulation, neurotechnology that can be utilized. We utilize it in the brain spa. What's really sweet about this one is that you can also use this device at home as a way of kind of learning how to master focus, stress, cognitive agility, those kinds of things that people need in order to be successful in your high-level executive positions. So audio-visual entrainment it's a technique that uses goggles and a headset that are pulsating lights and tones at a particular frequency based, again, on what it is, what kind of brain state we're wanting to bring your brain into. The goal with audio-visual entrainment is to really rapidly shift your brain state into whatever state we have it utilizing. And I'll tell you that this can happen very quickly. We've done experiments where we've wired somebody up to an EEG, and we're watching their brain waves, and then we turn on an audio-visual entrainment device. So maybe their brain waves are showing us a lot of beta wave. We turn on the audio-visual entrainment, and within a couple of minutes, we can already see the alpha protocol that we put on. We can see those alpha waves showing up in the EEG data. So this can happen quite quickly, and then you keep running the protocol for a period of time, and it really starts to bring your brain into the state of whatever frequency you've chosen. So what happens with this really is the idea of the frequency following response. So with audio-visual entrainment, let's say we're going to do an alpha protocol. You put the glasses on, you put the headset on, everything's kind of pulsing at you, your brain's getting stimulus at that frequency of maybe we've got it at 10 hertz, which is an alpha frequency range or frequency. And so it starts pulsating. So the brain is getting that stimulus. Once that stimulus starts to hit like the optic nerve, it starts to recruit neurons around there to kind of move, to start following the frequency that is being delivered to the brain, right? And so it doesn't take very long, and then those neurons are starting to pulse at that same frequency, and then the communication about that just kind of keeps happening, and you can get the brain into this state of, like, if we're doing 10 hertz, a 10 hertz state. So that would feel like, for the individual who's doing it, it would feel like a very calm state, but a very clear focus state as well. So what it can be really good for is, a lot of times executives can get kind of stuck in one frequency, and oftentimes that frequency is high gear, right? You are going, 90 miles an hour constantly, and the brain is just, thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And you just kind of get stuck in that frequency. This is where audio-visual entrainment can be extremely helpful, because it can help to shift you out of that very quickly. And then if you continue to use this on a regular basis, over time, your brain just gets a little bit more accustomed to being in that frequency more regularly. And then it doesn't necessarily always need the extra push to go there, because it's producing some of that on its own. The other thing that audio-visual entrainment can do is, it's really good. There are protocols that are really good at fueling prefrontal cortex work. And so prefrontal cortex is where you're doing all of your problem solving, your decision making, your management of staff and projects and all kinds of activities. And so what the science shows us is that AVE can actually increase cerebral blood flow, and specifically you can target the prefrontal cortex. And so as that increases the blood flow, it allows for processing of information to be smoother, because we're getting more oxygen into the brain, and is going to provide more energy to the brain. So when you are feeling fatigued, like that brain fog, that decision fatigue, doing an audiovisual entrainment protocol that's really focused on that prefrontal cortex can really be helpful in kind of energizing the brain so that it can get back to doing the functions that it's used to doing. Research also shows that audiovisual entrainment does a really nice job of modulating some neurochemicals. The ones that have been talked about in the research the most are serotonin, which we know plays a role in stabilizing mood, so that can be really helpful for emotion regulation. Norepinephrine is another one. Really, norepinephrine has a lot to do with your alertness, your kind of just awareness and attention. And so when you have higher levels of norepinephrine, you likely need less caffeine to keep you paying attention and falling asleep. And the nice thing about ABE is it's not going to give you any of those side effects like caffeine can do. Endorphins have been another neurochemical that they've done a lot of research on with audiovisual entrainment. This can be good for endorphins, help with your experience of pain and also with your experience of stress. And so when you have regularly good levels of endorphins in your system, it can really lead to that stress reduction experience. And it can what it can do is actually lower your perception of pain, or so it could be physical pain, but it can also be your perception of like mental distress. And so when that gets lowered, there's less tendency for you to feel as overwhelmed, and you can regulate emotion better. And then the other neurochemical that is associated with audiovisual entrainment is melatonin. And melatonin's really good for, I was talking about recovery earlier. It's really helpful in regards to regulating the body's recovery process in general. And so it can help with sleep cycles, and that's so very important when it comes to being able to kind of restore both cognitively and physically. And then this again is talking with you about frequencies. So everything we do in the brain spa has to do with frequencies, electrical frequencies, because that's what your brain is. So theta frequency can be used to help prevent burnout. Again, that's one of those slower wave frequencies that can produce that sense of calm. Theta can also be, again, really good for like the aha moment. So for creativity, that can be a really helpful protocol. There's a protocol that's kind of 7 to 8 hertz that has been recommended in the research as one that you can use when you really want to tap into creativity and kind of help your brain kind of hit on some of those aha moments that can then be helpful not only in like problem solving, but decision making. And I think a lot of times when you're trying to problem solve employee issues, how to get a team to do something differently, those kinds of, that ability to be able to think creatively can be really beneficial in those areas of your work. Alpha frequency, again, is really bringing the brain into that calm focus. And so when you are in a space where you are feeling brain fatigue, or you are feeling scattered because your brain's jumping around in a bunch of ways, an alpha frequency, particularly the higher alpha frequencies, can bring your brain kind of into a state where it can be calm and focused, and that can create clarity so that you can engage in problem solving and decision making and those other tasks much better. Beta wave is kind of like the execution wave. It really is kind of our brain's default action state. So when we're just sitting here, probably most of you right now as you're listening are in beta wave. Some of you might be heading into alpha wave. It's night and it's dark out, and so we might be heading that way. But as you're listening and taking information in without having to do any of the heavy lifting of making big sense of all of it or doing something with it now, that's beta waves. So that's kind of that default state. And can be very useful when you just are needing to kind of get into doing the work that you need to do in any particular moment. And then we have the breakthrough gamma wave, which really is about that ability to kind of manipulate a lot of information very successfully all at one time, and really can help with like being innovating with this is a really, when you want to make a decision, this gamma wave frequency can be really helpful in terms of helping you kind of sift through all the different factors that might come into play when you're looking at making major decisions in your work. So again, give you an example of some protocols. This is just a few of the types of protocols that you might do in a brain spa. In our brain spa, we have a menu of cocktails, right, that you can have that include kind of one of each of these 4 protocols that we're talking about this evening. So this one's an example of the hard reset, the theta wave, right? So you're just wanting to kind of take your brain out of that chronic stress state that it is in. Every single executive can relate to take it out of that state and move it into a much calmer place. And as you do that, that can help to reduce the amount of stress hormones like cortisol that you have in your brain, which we know can, if you have, there's good research that shows chronic levels of stress like cortisol in your brain can shrink the hippocampus, and then that impacts your ability, to, your working memory ability and your ability to be able to manipulate a lot of information. And so theta wave can be very restorative in that regard. And then this is an alpha wave protocol. So it's kind of like the idea of kind of bringing the conscious and the unconscious mind together in this little area where you have this very calm awareness, right? So this is the thing that we all want to get to when we're practicing meditation, is this state of calm awareness. The running an alpha protocol on the audio-visual entrainment device can get you there very, very quickly. And what it can allow you to do is to remain calm under pressure and still maintain a high speed of information processing, because it's not calm and checked out, it is calm and focused. And so it can be really very helpful. A lot of athletes, a lot of musicians, a lot of creative people use this frequency range to really kind of help them stay steady as they go through their really intense times of their work. Then we could use a gamma protocol. We're referring to it here as the Eureka mode. This is really targeting those really high frequency ranges. And what gamma can really do, again, is really help to synchronize different parts of the brain and really enhance then the communication or information processing that's happening throughout the brain. And the outcome has to do with lots of like ability to think creatively, to engage in innovative thinking processes, to take massive amounts of data or information and synthesize that in a way that it can lead to strategic visions and those sorts of things. So this is just an example of what one might do with audio-visual entrainment at any point in the day to optimize your functioning as an executive in the environment that you're working in. So you might start your morning with kind of a focus boost. So you might use a protocol like that, and like a energy protocol that, or a brain booster protocol that's going to move you into more of a, getting you into the more of a beta state, and then you might, go along with your day and you're focusing and you're doing well, but you're hitting that 3 o'clock time when it's siesta time for all of us and our brains start to shut down a little bit, and you're feeling that need for some caffeine. So you could use one of the protocols in the audio-visual entrainment device to kind of be your natural caffeine. The nice thing about that is that when you drink caffeine, eventually that leaves your system, and sometimes that is uncomfortable for some of us, drinking caffeine can give us jitters that can make it near impossible to kind of think clearly. And so the audiovisual entrainment can kind of move you into that place without having any of the side effects you might feel. Maybe, you're having to travel that day and have some jet lag. And so again, the audiovisual entrainment protocols, you add those along with the transcranial alternating stim, as well as the other protocols that Guy's going to talk about shortly, that can be a really nice way to help you transition from jet lag quicker, more efficiently, with less of the kind of side effect that comes along with jet lag. And then if maybe you've traveled because you're doing a presentation in the early evening, or maybe you are at work and you know that, 4 hours from now you've got a presentation, and so you've decided, I want to do get my brain kind of prepared for that. And so using maybe an high alpha or low beta frequency as a way to kind of prep your brain to get into that calm focus state so that you can do the presentation effectively. So those are just some ideas of how this might be helpful kind of throughout one's day. So I'm just going to kind of not talk you through this one. It's basically kind of talking about the same thing that I've been saying, is that like what we're doing with neurotech is really optimizing performance. And so this isn't just about wellness, although we are a brain spa. And so people always think of wellness when you use the word spa, but we really are a neurotech spa. And so it's focused on brain optimization and taking those biological assets that you already have and bumping them up so that you can be more successful in the tasks that you have to do on a daily basis. So while you may not be able to control the market, you can definitely control your frequency. And we would strongly encourage you to use these neurotechnologies that we have in the brain spa to do just that.
Okay, so I get to talk about photobiomodulation. So you'll see that on the screen is the TPBM, so transcranial photobiomodulation, and the TPEMF, so Pulsed Electromagnetic Field Therapy. So those are the two that I'm going to be talking about. So photobiomodulation is probably my all-around favorite. So I'll just say a little bit about myself. I have 5 businesses. I work 70 to 80 hours a week. A 60-hour week kind of is like, that's vacation. So I'm sure there's many of you who can relate to that, whether that is at work in the office or just living a modern life that has you perhaps working, chauffeuring children around, and all of the preparations that are required for that, and days, turn into be, a 12 to 14-hour day every day. So all of us are just, burning a lot of our bandwidth all the time. So we know the things that we're supposed to do. Get a good night's sleep, eat 3 healthy, organic, fresh prepared meals every day, exercise every day, meditate, spend time with friends. So I took a spell in my life where I actually tried to live the way that our health and wellness people would prescribe for us. And what I found out was that's a full-time job. Like just being healthy or following the health outline is a full-time job. So I figured maybe one of the only people who actually does it is Oprah. And she does that by having a cook and a chauffeur and a personal trainer and so I'm not there yet, but I hope to be one day. But one of the shortcuts that I have found, and that is really the basis behind Brain Spa, is how we can use the modern technology of these bioelectric devices to help optimize our physiology and shorten the time window to get those benefits. And that's where these come in, and both of these have some pretty remarkable benefits. So I'll share a little bit of my own story with photobiomodulation. So when I'm good and I'm using my device on a daily basis, at some point I kind of lose track of the benefit. But then, like all of us do, I'll tend to fall off the wagon, and I might go a few weeks or a few months where I'm not using it. And again, it's not a sudden thing, but the way I notice it is the piles on my desk start to get bigger, and that's just a little feedback from my environment that I'm not keeping up. And that's usually my cue to ask myself, what's different? Oh yes, I've not been doing my photobiomodulation, so I'll start. And again, often I don't really feel the difference experientially, but what I notice, again, as I go to my desk and the piles are gone. And that's become my cue to it's doing its thing. So I've come to see over the years of cycling on, cycling off, that the benefits that Fran just talked you through, that some of the benefits that I'm going to talk you through, they really do happen. And sometimes the way you notice that is by getting the gain and then not doing it and feeling the loss. And that becomes, for me, that's my best motivator to get back at it. My throughput when I'm doing my brain spa is so much better. Photobiomodulation, one of the things, the biggest things, most top line things you'll hear about photobiomodulation is the increased mitochondrial activity. So that's going to be, the thing that's most talked about is energy production. So our mitochondria make ATP, which is the energy our cells use to drive life. The thing that doesn't get talked about as much, mostly because it's a more recent discovery, is that mitochondria do a lot of cell-to-cell signaling, and they actually form their own networks, and they're often communicating ahead of the signal that's maybe moving through neurons in the brain or moving through peripheral nerves in the body. That the mitochondria are actually signaling ahead, preparing the nerves and the blood vessels for the upcoming activity of the nerve conductivity. So mitochondria play a really important role. And so being able to spark their activity by putting photons into the brain becomes an absolute must. So then the PEMF. So one of the, I think, interesting things about the physics of PEMF is in a magnetic field, any point in that field has the same energy, the same message, the same frequency as every other point. And so it's a really great way to communicate information into the brain in a very blanketing way, that every place that magnetic pulse reaches gets the same information. And so it's a powerful tool for affecting the whole organ, whereas some of the other ones may be more directed, like Fran talked about. The photocontrainment is really going to go through the audio-visual entrainment. An alternating current is going to primarily work between the flow of the electrodes. And when we have PEMF, because it's a field, it's spreading out in all directions. And so it's a more encompassing communication to the brain. And it causes one of its primary effects is kind of a synchronization of brain activity. So we'll look at some of these things in more detail. So again, the idea of where does the energy boost of photobiomodulation come in? And as I said, what I notice is my productivity can stay high for more of the day, which just means I get more things done. And it isn't always just more. To use bad English, I might say more better, because the work product is actually improved as well. And so it isn't just the volume of work, it's the quality of work. So for me, to be able to have more throughput in a day, make better decisions, communicate plans or instructions to colleagues, employees in a clearer fashion, all improves what needs to happen in a day in the office. So this is one, there's actually a fantastic study that was just done. It was presented at the Boston, Mass General Grand Rounds for photobiomodulation. Very sophisticated technology used in this recent study, showing the impact of photobiomodulation on cerebral spinal fluid and on cerebral blood flow, in particular the oxygenation that happens at the hemoglobin when PBM is used. So they used, and this is part of what I find interesting, is the technology is called FNIRS. So it's functional near-infrared light imaging. So like a functional MRI, only using light and not a magnetic field. And so they were using the FNIRS to measure the impact of near-infrared light on the brain. And so very high-end, the most sophisticated imaging and treatment technology we have. And they were able to really show in great detail the effect of photobiomodulation on the physiology of the brain. So one is this turning on the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system is the lymphatic system of the brain. It's typically only activated at night in deep sleep. So if a person isn't getting good quality sleep, your brain isn't entering into isn't initiating the glymphatic system, so we're not getting good clearance. Part goes into age-related decline, mild cognitive decline, dementia. Part of that is driven by the accumulation of waste and plaques in the brain. So any opportunity to stimulate the glymphatic system is just a bonus opportunity to take out the trash and to freshen things up. So nitric oxide, so increasing nitric oxide production. Most of the time we think about nitric oxide, we think about vasodilation, and that's true. But I think one of the pieces that gets missed is it isn't just dilating the vasculature, it's also enhancing the health and flexibility of the vasculature. So again, in an aging brain, one of the things that we're worried about is, say, something like vascular dementia or stroke, things of this nature, where the fragility of the vascular system is part of what contributes to that outcome. So if we can keep our blood vessels more elastic, we can hold off those age-related degenerative processes that come. So I think nitric oxide has a dual role for improving brain function, vascularization, but just the health of the vascular system itself. So one of the things that we hear, maybe the most common comment that I hear from people that are using photobiomodulation is they talk about like how calm they feel, or they fell asleep, or it really helps my anxiety. And that could be something as simple as a red light mouth guard, and a person may feel that they get anxiety control from that. It might be a high potency photobiomodulation, and people talk about it there. So it really does seem to be a response, almost like a reflex that our body has. And the simplest way I can think about communicating that is that feeling you have when you step out into the sun and you just feel the sun hit your body. You kind of have that, right? Like we've just evolved as the sun as a source of life. And so when the near infrared, which is the primary thing that we get from the sun is the red and near infrared range, our body just has a reflex response to that to calm. We also see that in the research, that if you put red or near infrared light anywhere on the body, the alpha waves in the brain increase. So again, just kind of a reflex response of calming. So probably hear about this a couple of different times tonight, this BDNF. So a lot of positives. It helps grow neurons. It helps restore neurons that have been damaged. So again, in say like a TBI or in something like a neurodegenerative condition, dementia, the increase of BDNF can help healing process, but it also contributes to neuroplasticity. And I don't know about you guys, for me, the rate of learning today is just off the charts. I've been trying to keep up with AI, and the moment you think you've got just the beginning of an understanding, there's a whole new, now it's, Gemini 2.5, and now it's Gemini 3, and now they're flirting with Gemini 3.5, and I'm just like, I can't take it anymore. We try and harness the power of AI as much as we can. We have a software engineer that's building our automations and working on our AI integration. But I swear, every time he gets a module completed, he has to start redoing that one. And so the cycle is months, not years. So this idea of, I think, neuroplasticity has never been more important than it is right now, to be able to keep up with the pace of change. So sleep, of course, very important. I mentioned earlier, the lymphatic system is going to get fired up in deep sleep. We get our most restorative sleep in deep sleep. We do our memory consolidation. In REM, we do more of like what we learned today is consolidated, but also when we have problems, right, or questions that have lingered through from our day, our unconscious, as it's doing that consolidation, is also sifting through all that information and kind of coming up with solutions. So the need for good quality, uninterrupted sleep is essential. And so one of the things of being able to normalize the circadian rhythm, and photobiomodulation is a great choice for kind of normalizing. In the morning, it can help reset your circadian rhythm for the day. And in the evening, it can help stimulate the melatonin production for a natural night's sleep. So a number of benefits that go into both in the moment kind of peak performance, but also all of these things that I've talked about so far are also neuroprotective. So they keep the busy brain healthier today, also sets me up for a better next week, but more importantly, helps me for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the road as my brain is naturally aging. It's keeping more of the youthful functionality that I'm going to want to have later. We use photobiomodulation in our neurodegenerative clients all the time, so dementia, Parkinson's, things of that nature. And we see amazing results in that population. So we know the efficacy of it there. We just know it's more powerful if we have a preventative model rather than a treatment model. So, we can increase your throughput today, but also thinking about your brain of tomorrow. So now a little more focus kind of on the PEMF. So again, neuroplasticity comes up as one of the benefits from PEMF, and that is going to be, so one of the things that PEMF is going to do is just a base function, is it's going to help to normalize the resting membrane potential of the neurons. And that's a mouthful, but basically what it means is neurons that fire too easily will kind of normalize, and neurons that need more stimulus to fire will also normalize. So our brain moves back to an optimal state where we don't need too much stimulus and we don't overreact to a small stimulus. And so our functioning is more of an equilibrium. And this optimizes our brain in a number of ways. So the functional connectivity, and this goes back to that part I was saying at the beginning where with PEMF, the field has the same information in every part of the field. So to be able to saturate the brain in kind of a one communication brings with it a synchronizing process of it, just very kind of natural synchronizing across the whole brain. Helps to bring in the connectivity that we need to be moving information around in a very efficient way without latency or loss, right? So things that can happen when we think about digital communication, same thing can happen in the brain. We can have a dropout of information. So the end product is not as well informed as it would be if it had kept all of the information through its rounds of computation. So inflammation, of course, inflammation is a problem that can be from injury, so something like a concussion, a high fever, an infection, any number of things that can cause neural inflammation. We know from research on things like Parkinson's and other neurodegenerative disease that our gut health can dramatically affect our brain health. We've always wondered, like, how does that happen with blood-brain barrier? You're supposed to keep things out. Turns out things can travel up inside the vagus nerve and into the brain that way. So we can get constituents from our microbiome into our brain that can lead to neuroinflammation. So it is a more concerning problem than one might think. You don't have to have had an illness or a concussion to have neural inflammation. And so using PEMF is a safe, effective way. And one of the challenges of trying to treat neuroinflammation in the brain is the blood-brain barrier. And it's going to block most anti-inflammatories that you're taking orally from getting into the brain. So using something like photobiomodulation or PEMF bypasses all of that and gets that directly into the brain to have that anti-inflammatory effect. So, kind of the emotional baseline, there's a way in which this can maybe not seem that it exactly fits with the idea of kind of executive functioning, but I can think of many times in my life, primarily in negotiations, so around business, where I did not get the outcome I wanted from a meeting or a negotiation or interaction, and it was just 100%. I was not able to maintain kind of an emotional equilibrium, and in that getting a little more activated than I should have, the nature of the conversation did not go in an optimal way, and I didn't get the outcome I wanted. So we really have learned an appreciation for this particular aspect to be able to have, maintain an equanimity throughout. We also know that as some of our limbic system gets a little more activated, it tends to downregulate the executive function. So the very resources we need for quick thinking, information synthesis becomes downregulated as the limbic system becomes upregulated. So being able to reach in and tamp down, soothe and settle our emotional processing systems is helpful. So speed. With the brain, there's a couple of ways to think about speed. So one is actually speeding up the processing, so the speed of the thalamic cortical loop. So that's one way. That's actually quite challenging to do. But another way that we can get speed is by eliminating friction in the process. And so this goes back to that idea of PEMF affecting the whole brain with a simultaneous communication at all points in the field to bring that brain into a coherent resonance. And by optimizing the ability for processing to move through the brain with less friction, that actually has the effect of speeding up processing, but also the quality of the processing. So it's a both and. So regeneration, so I've mentioned in a few ways how this helps from a regeneration. Here we're looking at some protein factors that can be positively affected through PEMF and just adding to the regenerative process. So again, part of it is we depend a lot on sleep for our regeneration, and I think that's absolutely fantastic, and we really do need to focus and optimize our sleep for all the things that come from it. But it can't hurt to get a little extra boost on the regenerative side and not have to put all of the weight on that of getting a good night's sleep. So I think we get a nice bonus here through the PEMF of stimulating some physiological pathways that aren't picked up in some of the other modalities. Here you could, again, working with this idea of being able to synchronize the brain. And as we can do that and help the brain be in a kind of more steady state, it sets us up for a good night of sleep. So if we can arrive at our bedside and be able to shift gears from whatever I've been doing all day, whatever crises have been managed, whatever dragons I was slaying, and I can just set that aside, put my head down on the pillow and fall asleep, ideally not out of exhaustion, but actually to go through a normal, natural cascade of a sleep cycle, and then to be able to stay in that cycle and not get bumped out of it by poor hormone regulation, by excess cortisol, these things that can happen that can interrupt our sleep cycle that are incredibly common. If we've been optimizing our brain through the day, then more likely our brain is going to be able to make it through the night doing what it needs to do. Fran had talked about the audiovisual entrainment device, so I'll just say that's one of my favorites for sleep. You can actually do the neuromodulation while you're sleeping, so a great support for folks who might be struggling to get that sleep cycle under control. So we, of course, stack these. Fran had hinted at this earlier, that we can use all of these modalities, and we often do all at one time. So we may have photobiomodulation, PEMF, the visual entrainment, transcranial alternating stimulation, transcranial pink noise, all happening at one time, each adding in their unique piece of the benefit. And then, of course, some of them leveraging the same system, but from different angles. So the way PEMF decreases inflammation is different than the way PBM decreases inflammation, which is different than the way TACS reduces inflammation. So a number of modalities leading to a similar outcome, but through different pathways. This is one of the reasons we stack the modalities. One of the things with Brain Spa is that we've created it so it's a much more kind of casual way for people to engage in it. So the setting is less formal. You can come in, lay back in a comfortable chair. You can take a nap, or if you're kind of like some of my A-type clients, they don't really have an off switch, but they've seen the benefit of Brain Spa and all that it brings for them, but they'll just bring their work with them. So they'll kick back in the chair, they've got all the technology on, and they're on their computer taking care of business and having a both and experience. So it's an option within the Brain Spa to be able to really orchestrate the experience that fits your day best. And then many of the modalities we have at-home versions of. So that's another option of how can you take Brain Spa home with you? And that's through things like the audiovisual entrainment, some of our photobiomodulation devices. So our advocacy is always prevention rather than treatment. So don't wait until you're exhausted. Don't wait until you're burned out. Don't wait until you have, a breakdown. Come in before then. Keep your nervous system healthy and just skip over that part. I think that's a great way to do it. But also, if we're lucky, we're all going to get old. And what I'd rather do is have a 50-year-old brain when I'm 70. And how do I do that? I do that by doing these types of treatments now to keep my brain healthy, again, lymphatic system, keep the toxins out, so that my brain can age more gracefully and I can end up with a healthier organ at the end of my life. So our advocacy is prevention rather than treatment, but of course we can do both. So if Brain Spa holds interest for you, you can see our contact information there. The sessions are not bookable online. You need to call in, make an appointment, but they're pretty readily available. Again, we try and keep it casual so that same-day appointments are often available, but it does need to be done with a phone call or in email and set up directly with our scheduler. So if there are any questions, by all means, go ahead. Sure. So the question is, can I talk more about the options for home purchasing? So we have two types of audiovisual entrainment devices. So you're going to come in at about $650 and $1,200 for those. A couple of different photobiomodulation options. I would say kind of at the least expensive end at $60. I'm in love with that particular device. It's very high power photobiomodulation for a very affordable price. The downside is it's small, so treatment just takes longer because you have to treat more areas. But then we step through, so $60, we're going to come in at about $500 for a high-intensity wrap, then into our panels at $1,500, and then into the helmet at $3,300. Yeah, so that's audio. Oh, then we have a nasal laser and stim device, so that's going to come in at about $500. So that's transcranial stimulation and intranasal photobiomodulation. So that's a nice little simple, portable, easy to do device. And then most of our devices can also be rented, and then rent can be a rent to own. So $75 a week. So let's say you wanted to do one of the audiovisual entrainment devices, $75 a week. That allows you to take it home, give it a try, find out, am I actually going to do this, or is it just going to sit on the nightstand and I don't ever get around to it? If you're one of those people who, buy the treadmill and then just hang clothes on it, you want to find that out with these devices. So if you rent it for 2 weeks and you're just like, it's not really for me, bring it back, great. On the other hand, if you fall in love with it, which most people do, then you can just rent it till you own it. So kind of a payment plan, or your rent goes towards your purchase. So you could have us just pay it off. We can ship so that you don't need to be in the clinic. A lot of our kind of device-based clients are all over North America. We do virtual consults with them, help pick out a device or a suite of devices to treat whatever they have going on, ship them. We have a lot of online resources, how-to videos, manuals that help people walk through getting up and running with the devices. And of course, we're always available to hop on a virtual call to walk people through the use of the devices at home. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all. I look forward to seeing you again next month when we talk about COVID, challenging to treat chronic conditions, and how those can be addressed through mind-body medicine and through bioelectric medicine, neurofeedback, things of that nature. So we'll have co-presenters, and it'll be a wonderful evening, I'm sure of it.